Ah, Tenpai, Tenpai, Tenpai. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. You know who it is by now.
Jimothy.
So, ladies and gents, it is fair to say that Tenpai does have some problems, and that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Now, I do have a quick deck profile for you guys, just to see what the Tenpai deck actually consists of, and then we're going to go in depth with some of the things that I've found whilst testing this deck and whether you guys agree with it. Now, I do feel like once it gets some more support, it's going to be a little bit more prominent, but as it stands, Tenpai needs some help, I'm not going to lie, and I'm not going to go out there on a whim and say it's a tier 1 deck because I don't think it is in its current form, but maybe in the future it might be. So without wasting any more time, let's just get into the profile. Okay, ladies and gents, let's get straight into the list. Unfortunately, because of the nature of Tenpai, this is not going to take too long because for the most part, the ratios are pretty straightforward and figured out. So obviously we're playing the triple Hydra, is your spell and trap searcher, gets you literally just get your engine going. A triple Chandra, again another combo piece, and the double Fadra. Again, I've seen a few lists play one, and if you don't know, ladies and gents, I always consult the realms of YouTube before I put a deck together, just because it just gives me ideas. I test a few builds, I see what I like, and then I change it to my own liking, or I build a deck outright and then I test it, and then I have a look at YouTube and so look at some builds and look at some tech cards. But for the most part, I kind of like the two. There's been times when I've lost one and the second one has come up, and obviously you just need to see your combo resolve when you win. And I'm also playing the one Magnum. This is another engine piece. With some of the cards that I'm actually playing in my main deck, I can facilitate this without my opponent having to play like light and dark monsters. So it does come up from time to time. So yeah, that's it for the Tenpai engine monsters. On to the Tenpai spells and traps, pretty straightforward because this is all we've got at the moment. Triple Sangan summoning, field spells busted, just yeah. This is, if you don't see the field spell, ladies and gents, this is where the problems start, and obviously I'll go into a little bit more depth when I'm talking about the deck on a whole. But triple field spell as well as triple Sangan Kaiman, again all in common. Very easy to get a hold of, ladies and gents, which is surprising why I'm not seeing as much Tenpai as I thought I would, but yeah, it is what it is. Next, onto the tech. Now, this is where your deck list can vary. I've seen a few different deck lists. I've seen like the hand trap variant. I've also seen the board breaker variant, and there's no correct way of playing it. But I do feel like a mix between the two is probably the most optimal, just because it covers both. Sometimes you run into back row and you just get obliterated, and then sometimes you kind of like just need the hand traps to slow your opponent down so you can resolve your combo. So having that flexibility, and especially with the space that Tenpai's got, I would suggest it's probably the most optimal build for now until we get some new support. So very quickly, triple Ash Blossom, very nice and simple. Triple Effect Veiler, again, this serves a dual purpose. If I see Magnamot and then a Veiler, I can actually resolve Magnamot, especially on my opponent's turn. Triple Nibiru, again, this is a little bit contentious, but again, I just want to slow my opponent down or at least make them waste a few resources. And Nibiru definitely likes to clear a board, especially with the presence of, or the lack of presence of Omni-Negates. And then to finish it off, triple Infinite Impermanence, and that's it for in the way of hand traps, ladies and gents. Just onto some more non-engine. I am actually running the one Terraforming along with Way Where There's a Will. I don't know why the Konami decides to print it like that, but it should be Where There's a Will, There's a Way. But this card is actually pretty nice. The way that I use this card is a little bit like bait. I just try to force my opponent to try and do something. I've excavated consistently at least 5 cards. My opponent always has 2 to 3 monsters on field and maybe like 1 or 2 spells and traps, and I just keep like reoccurring, and they can see what you add obviously, but it's the fact that if you start off with this, you potentially have like the chance of seeing board breakers is very high, especially with prosperity in the deck. You can literally just dig through your deck. And then one Call by the Grave, one Change of Heart, one Triple Tactics Talent, one Harpy's Feather Duster with the double Lightning Storm, double Pot of Prosperity. Just because I'm playing a will, you can go for the free Pot of Prosperity, but I keep finding myself
prosperitying resolving its effect, and then like just like digging up another prosperity, and it really frustrates me. It's kind of like the same situation I had with Desires, which could be a good shout for this deck because you play a lot of 3-ups. So you could potentially swap out the prosperities and put Desires in for a little bit more of a, I would say, budget friendly, but prosperity is pretty cheap at the moment. And then triple forbidden droplets, again, just the ability to go second, ladies and gents. It just definitely helps out. And that's it for the main deck. Very nice and simple, very clean and cut. Yeah, it's Tenpai, what do we need to say? Next, onto the extra deck, we are playing double Bident Dragon along with the one Sanganpai Transcendent Dragon. Again, like I said, this appears to be pretty standard. I like 2. You don't always go into 2, but like when I took this deck to locals, I found myself grinding like, and I needed the second one, which is funny enough because I will go into that a little bit more in a moment, ladies and gents, but 2 is definitely sufficient. I wouldn't play any more, but I definitely would not play any less just because of the nature of the deck at the moment. Obviously, the one Trident Dragon, blah, 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 blah. Ask a friend, as they say. Don't ask a friend, they probably won't have one. Nah, but on a real, you do need this, especially with prosperity, because if you're gonna resolve prosperity and still hope to kill that turn, you kind of need Trident Dragon. You can do it in other ways depending on the board state, but he just allows you to just definitely assure that you can improve prosperity, and that's its main use. You don't necessarily need it to win. You do enough damage as it is, but if you're resolving pros, you definitely need Trident Dragon just to kind of like push for that extra damage and to just clear like big monsters basically. So yeah, one Samurai Destroyer as well as the one Odd Eyes Meteor Burst Dragon. Again, yeah. To be honest, I actually prosp these away pretty consistently. For the most part, you're not going to go into these because you don't want to waste the resources on field, which is, again, something that I will talk about when I'm looking at the deck a little bit more in depth in a moment. One Black Rose Moonlight Dragon. This card's nice. I like this card. One Ruddy Rose Dragon. That's just like a secret tech of the day. This is actually a negate, you know. I didn't actually realize until I read the card. I only utilize its first effect consistently, but it does actually have a negate for a card on field, which is nice. And one Black Rose Dragon. You use this a lot. This just nukes boards. It's silly. One Going First FTK card. Heretics Dragon of Seals or Heavenly Spheres. This card's nice. I've got no complaints with this card. Potentially could put it at 2 if you really wanted to, but I probably would vote against it. One Striker Dragon, and then the obvious, the Link OTK package in Hita, Promethean, Raging Phoenix, Zelantis. And that is it, ladies and gents, just in case you get hit by D-Barrier. So yeah, like I said, we're going to get into a little bit more in depth and talk about some of the pros and cons with the deck. So yeah, let's just get into it.
Okay, so what is the problem with Tenpai, ladies and gents? Now, it's, in my opinion, the fact that it has to go second. Well, it doesn't have to, but obviously we all know that it's most optimal going second. And in that lies the problem. You are at a disadvantage with regards to card advantage. Now, the reason to say this, and you can see in the background some replays that are showing, I'm not playing most optimally. I'm a little bit tired, but yeah, I'm not playing most optimally, and you'll see through some of the plays. Now, in this initial one where I'm playing against Dark World, I think I hand trap him twice, and I put my opponent on, you better have the extender. Now, obviously, we know how Dark World plays, ladies and gents. If he'd have played these cards correctly, he would have just outpaced me, and he would have set up a field. Fortunately, in this instance, he didn't actually go ahead and do that, which was a bit of a problem for him, because then I proceeded to OTK. But there's quite a few times, and especially when I was testing in locals, where I threw hand traps at my opponent. Now, that is all fine and well, ladies and gents, and it feels really good to kind of stop your opponent from building the most optimal board. But with the decks that we have in the meta right now, you've got like Snake Eye, you've also got just some other heavy combo decks like, I don't know, Voiceless Voice, for example, that can play branded. They still can set up somewhat of a board, and you're down cards. Now, that means it's going to be all the more difficult to push through the board that they've established, as well as, which is probably the most crucial part, the hand traps that they play. Now, I played against quite a few Snake Eye, and you would argue that it's a half decent matchup, but it's not. It really isn't, especially with the amount of interaction they've got on their field. You've got SB to worry about, which will just get rid of your field spell instantly. HP. Your normal summon is fragile, which I'll talk about in a moment, as well as having Promethean Princess engraved. So that's already 3 interactions that are definitely going to occur on your turn. Now if you've thrown hand traps at your opponent and they still managed to set up a board, you've got to play for at least, I'd say at least like 1, maybe 2 of those types of interruption, not to mention the hand traps that they're going to have in hand, which I think is a problem, because you're facing a board which establishes some kind of like setup as well as a couple of like interruptions in hand, and you've got like 2, maybe 3 cards at most to play with. Yes, you can potentially prosp for a card, or you could dig it off the field spell that I added in a deck, but you're always at a disadvantage, and it's very rare that you can actually just play through a field with 3 cards. Now there are a few obvious options to this, and this is where I think some of the good things shine about Tenpai. You've got loads of space for tech cards. If you've seen, well, I'm gonna go through my list again, and I'll show you the side deck. But with some of the cards that I've got in my list, I've got like Phantasme. I've also got Shifter in the side, so you can actually play blowout cards, which just allow you to just win a game, just outright win a game on the spot, and that can actually happen from time to time. But there's very often you won't draw the right combination of cards, and you'll have to throw a couple of hand traps at your opponent, and they're still able to play, which is the biggest issue I find with Tenpai. Now let's go and have a look at the list, and let's discuss what could potentially be done about it. Okay, ladies and gents, so this is the list once again. Like I said previously, there's a lot of space for tech cards. Now, you don't necessarily have to put in all these hand traps. You could put in other cards, you could put in more cards that will facilitate your engine. But with the way that the nature of Tenpai plays, I don't think you really want to do that. Mainly because if you start watering down your deck with just engine cards, yes, you'll be able to play, but because you're going second deck, you're going to have to play for a number of negates, and that can or cannot happen, and you don't really want to leave things to chance in Yu-Gi-Oh! And you've got no control over the type of build or type of board an opponent will build. If you've got no hand traps, they can literally scope their field or their board as much as they want because you've got no interaction. So it's a bit of a catch-22, because if you start taking hand traps out in favor of more engine, then the likelihood of you playing for a deck is not likely. But then if you leave the hand traps in, the likelihood of you playing for a deck as well as your opponent potentially having like 1 to 2 hand traps is not likely. So you're always stuck in this little bit of a grey area where you don't really know what to do. Also, I know I alluded to this previously, your normal summon is so fragile at the moment. It's ridiculous. Like, if they clear any of your normal summons, I've had somebody SP my normal summon, and yes, I've resolved its effect to like search or add or whatever. But then they had one more piece of interaction which literally just stopped my turn. I just wasn't able to do anything. I think I got Ghost Ogred on the Chundra, which just just literally ended my turn, which was frustrating because I blew all my hand traps, stopping my opponent from playing. I got Ogred, and then literally that was it. Now, let me just put this in quickly. There are a few things that's going to happen in the future which will allow Tenpai to be a little bit stronger. Tenpai is getting its own Snake Eye popular called Tenpai Dragon Genroku. It's probably going to change its name when it comes to the TCG. You know what Konami are like. But this card is actually a very powerful play starter. It can special summon itself, it can modulate its level, it can become a tuner, and it can special summon a monster or Tenpai monster from the deck. It does lock you into dragons, but hey ho, who cares? We're going to win the game anyway. So this card is actually busted. Like, it's one of the most broken pieces of support I've ever seen. And it goes to show a lot of decks are starting to get a popular, by the way. It's a little bit of a theme going on here. But yeah, this card is definitely going to add to allowing this deck to play a little bit more optimally. Also, it's also got a trap, Sangan Kaihu. Now, this trap basically ensures that you're going to get a battle phase next turn, because it stunts the main phase once, or the main phase 2, depending on where your opponent is. So you can literally just stop your opponent from playing, force your opponent into playing into a not optimal field, mainly because they've had to skip their battle phase, because you'll push them into going into their battle phase early when they could have potentially used the battle phase to clear some of the monsters on field. Now, if you've set up the big Sangan Super Dragon Transcend Dragon, you can actually force your opponent to attack into it, which is something that I did when I was playing one of the mirror matches, which you've seen in the previous replay. It's a little bit of a cheeky little way of, like, obviously playing the game, just because this dragon will just literally crash over majority of your opponent's monsters, which is a little bit annoying for them, just because that means they've wasted resources. So the trap and the new card is definitely going to kind of shape what's going on, but in its current form, ladies and gents, and this is why I believe that not too many people have kind of like taken Tenpai and pushed it to like regional tops or whatnot. There have been a few here and there, but it's just these issues, these little nuances with the deck, which is stopping you from actually being successful with the Tenpai deck, just because all of this combined makes for a weird experience where you kind of like gambling. And if you know anything about Yu-Gi-Oh, ladies and gents, consistency is the key. You want your deck to be as consistent as possible, to always be able to do what your deck is intending to do, and Tenpai doesn't always do that, just because sometimes you will just get stopped and you've got no way of facilitating any kind of extension. Sometimes I've drawn like 4 hand traps and like 1 part of prosperity. For example, my prosperity gets hit by Ash because obviously I'm low on card advantage because I threw hand traps at my opponent, and if they've got Ash, then they know they're going to Ash that because it's just going to potentially draw me into a starter, and I just die. I literally got no more interaction for my opponent, and that can be a frustrating experience, which is why I feel like people have kind of shied away from it, because they've tested it and realized, look, I'm literally dying on like 1 to 2 cards here. I've stopped my opponent from playing. They can stop me from playing with literally 1 card, and then just OTK me on a crackback anyway. And with Snake Eye being in the format now, board breakers just is not the way to go, because you'll just get your board breakers hand ripped. So you're kind of forced to play hand traps, and it's just not optimal. But I don't know, ladies and gents, am I wrong? I could be wrong. I could just be waffling and I'm just completely out of my mind, but that's just how I feel after testing the deck somewhat. I feel like it's still got a few issues that need to be resolved, and I don't feel like it's actually been resolved as yet. People are still like messing with Tenpai. Maybe there's a secret like little bit of a dragon tech that they could tech in, which gives the deck a little bit more flexibility, but as it stands with the hand trap version, I feel like it's just not as strong as it could be at the moment, and it's probably why we're not seeing a lot of Tenpai. But anyway, what are your thoughts, ladies and gents? Let me know in that comment section below if there are any like little techs or cards or strategies that you're using with Tenpai that will allow you to be a bit more efficient with the deck. Let me know in that comment section. And we find ourselves at the end of another video. If you did like this content, you know what to do by now. Hit that like button, share, subscribe, all of that beautiful good stuff, and I would definitely see you guys on the next video. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.